The Ukrainian Air Force has struck an area in the southern sector of the front where the occupying Russian army's manpower and military equipment were concentrated. The area where the occupiers were gathered was identified by the Flying Skull Battalion of the Unmanned Systems Forces, and the information was relayed to the Air Force. A strike by a MiG-29 fighter jet with a French-made AASM-250 Hammer aerial bomb destroyed a house where military personnel were located, soldiers unloading ammunition into a nearby warehouse, military equipment, and munitions. It should be noted that Ukrainian aviation has increased its strikes on areas where the occupying Russian army's military personnel are concentrated and on hangars containing military equipment, both in the occupied territories and in Russia's border regions. As a result of these strikes, carried out mainly with US and French-made aerial bombs, a significant number of Russian army personnel and equipment have been destroyed. Ukraine shot down a Russian Su-35 for the first time using a Western F-16 fighter. This air battle in the Kursk direction was a historic victory for Kiev, writes Bild. It is noted that the air duel took place on June 7 over northeastern Ukraine. As part of the defense of the Sumy region, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine used aircraft to bomb enemy positions inside the country and in the Russian Kursk region. In response, the Russians sent a modern Su-35 into battle. However, the pilot of the Russian fighter was ambushed. Together with the F-16, Ukraine launched a Swedish Saab 340 AEWNC, which detected the enemy aircraft 200 to 300 kilometers from the border and transmitted the coordinates of the F-16. According to the publication, a Ukrainian F-16 launched an AIM-120 missile that shot down a Su-35 near the city of Koronivo in the Kursk region. The Russian pilot managed to eject, and the Ukrainian fighters returned to base without losses. It's not just the F-16, the real game changer was the Swedish AWACS system, which recognizes Russian aircraft hundreds of kilometers away and directs F-16 missiles in real time. The Su-35 didn't even know it was under attack, wrote Canadian pilot and aviation expert Mark Brooks on his page on the X social network. In addition, the analytical portal Air Power emphasized that this is the first air battle involving a Ukrainian F-16. Moreover, the Russian aircraft was shot down by a Dutch modification of the F-16AM, which many experts already considered obsolete. Earlier, the chairman of the Council of Reserves of the Ground Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Ivan Tymako said that since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, about 15 cases of destruction of Russian Su-35 aircraft have been confirmed. He noted that, according to unconfirmed figures, somewhere over 25 fighters were shot down. And taking into account that the entire Russian military-industrial complex has produced such Su-35s, with those that went for export and those that Russia has about 125. We understand that this is a third or a fourth of the Su-35 fleet, Tymachko said.
As reported recently, Ukrainian defense forces successfully hit Russian facilities that the aggressor country uses to carry out terror against Ukraine. General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said the Ukrainian defense forces launched a preemptive strike on the eve of the massive enemy shelling. Airfields basing enemy aircraft and other important military facilities were hit. In particular, on the night of June the 6th, a successful strike was carried out on the Engels airfield in the Saratov region, a place where enemy aircraft were concentrated after the SBU operation. The Diaghilevo airfield in the Ryazan region, where air tankers and escort fighters are based, are used to support missile strikes on Ukrainian territory. In addition, enemy strategic bombers are flying out of Diaghilevo. The work of enemy air defense was recorded in the Ryazan region. There is information about a fire in the target area. The results are being clarified, the report says. At the same time, in the Saratov region, multiple hits have been confirmed in at least 3 tanks with fuels and lubricants, followed by ignition and a large-scale fire at the facility. The occupiers' emergency services failed to localize the fire. Significant smoke is observed. Dozens of explosions were recorded in the target area. The results of the damage are being clarified, the report says. In addition, the Ukrainian Defense Forces attacked a number of important enemy targets on the territory of the Russian Federation and temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine. In particular, the defeat of the logistics point of the 30th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 72nd Motorized Rifle Division of the Russian Army in the area of the settlement of Kulbaki in the Kursk region was recorded. The results of the defeat are being clarified. The General Staff clarified that units of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense were involved in combat operations in cooperation with other components of the defense forces. In turn, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Unmanned Systems Forces revealed details of the strike on the oil depot of the Russian Armed Forces Strategic Aviation in the city of Engels. Long-range strikes were carried out on the Engels II military airfield in the Saratov region, as well as on the Krystal Combine oil depot located nearby. At least 15 to 20 explosions were recorded in the target area. Photos and videos published on Telegram confirm multiple hits on at least 3 fuel and lubricants tanks on the territory of Krystal. A large-scale fire broke out, which the Russian emergency services were unable to localize. It is also known that elements that ensure activity were damaged, the report says. It is also explained that the Krystal plant is a strategic facility used as a storage base for petroleum products, gasoline, diesel and aviation fuel for the Engels II strategic bomber airfield. This is already the 3rd successful destruction of this object by the Unmanned Systems Forces since the beginning of 2025, the statement said. In addition, operators of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Unmanned Systems Forces inflicted fire damage on an enemy logistics point in the Kursk region, as well as on a UAV contingent and a repair base in the temporarily occupied part of the Kherson region. The final results of the fire damage are being clarified.